Okay, so we got a 2014 GMC 2.4 liter. It came in, just running really choppy. You can't really drive it. You can put it around the parking lot, but that's about it. Customer said it's had some timing codes. You know what, idles, it really surges up and down. Doesn't really feel like an ignition issue. Doesn't feel like a misfire. I mean, it kind of. It's got some noise that goes with it. I can run that in a second and give you a listen for that. I just got it doing this code scan right now to see what's in there. What do we got? Intake camshaft position system performance. Crankshaft position. Oh yeah, so that's a P0011. Then we got a P0016 crankshaft position. Intake camshaft position not plausible. So both of those are pertaining to the intake. Oh, what do we got here? P0017 crankshaft position, exhaust camshaft position not plausible. Fuel pressure regulator performance is a P0089. Fuel pressure regulator 1 performance. High pressure, that's a P228D as in Delta. And then the ABS, we can ignore that for now. Okay, so we got a couple timing related issues, and then we got this fuel pressure regulator performance. Now, I'm going to ignore that for now because this is, you probably can't see that well. Oh, and I don't have my flashlight either. Beginning of the day, I'm not really set up. Here we go. Feel naked without having this in my pocket. But yeah, so it is GDI. We've got the high pressure pump, which runs off the camshaft. So if we're having a camshaft problem, it's possible maybe we're going to trigger those codes as well. If the engine's running so crappy and the idle's so low, you're probably not going to be able to develop the pressure that it needs to, so it's possible these might just flag anyways based off of these kinds of issues. So first things first, we will check the oil. We want to check the oil quality and level. We don't know anything about this car really. The customer just bought it. Let me wipe that off and double check it. Customer just bought it, and I guess the previous owner said that they had to get rid of it. They had to, they needed money, right? And sold it for really cheap. Chances are it's a gremlin. They probably had it to a shop, maybe multiple shops, couldn't figure it out, or maybe the cost of the fix was too much. With these kinds of codes here for all the timing stuff, I really can't see fixing this vehicle without going in to the timing chain area. I really can't see that front cover not coming off. This is only a 4-cylinder, so it's a little nicer than the 3.6s, but it's still not really that fantastic of a job to do. And maybe they're not really sure if that's the whole problem, or I don't know, maybe someone did that sort of work before and it didn't fix the problem. So either way, customer just bought it with these issues, got it really cheap, so it's worth fixing, but we need to figure out why it's doing this. So this right now is really high on the stick. When I smell it, doesn't really smell like fuel, but let me wipe that down and I'll double check it properly. Yeah, maybe it's kind of dark. I'm sorry for that. Way out. Hopefully you guys can see that. Level's pretty good. Maybe just a tiny touch high, but it's pretty good. Looks like oil, pretty clean. So that's not a problem in and of itself. So let me put you inside and show you what it sounds like, what it's doing. Okay, so also to show, it's got 141,000 kilometers on it. You know what? So normally if you have a misfire code or a misfire condition, I don't like clearing the codes. But this isn't a misfire. This isn't a misfire condition. I believe it's a timing chain area issue, and it's pretty constant, so I feel totally comfortable clearing those codes. You could go in to live data and kind of check on that. Did I turn the key on? Maybe I didn't. Yeah, you ain't gonna clear codes with the key off, buddy. Yeah, take it easy. You know, it's my first week on the job. So yeah, you could go through with a scan tool and kind of check some data, check stuff like that. Maybe you can get some information off of that. There we go, finally cleared. So maybe you can get some useful information off of here. However, the vehicle's cold. I want to start with throwing a pressure transducer in there, as well as looking at the intake pulses. This one's nice because since it's a 4-cylinder, you don't have to worry about the different banks for the timing, so I can just go in one cylinder and I know that whatever's timings on that cylinder is going to be more or less the same as all the cylinders. It would be nice. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the battery is right here, so I can put a relative compression trace on there too. I can do a cranking test with in-cylinder pressure, with in the intake, checking the vacuum pulses, checking the relative compression, so I can do that whole thing cranking, get a pretty good idea of the base mechanical of the engine, and then I'll do one running. And I want to start with that, and I want to do that before it gets too hot. While I'm doing that, it'll also give me a chance to pull a spark plug and kind of look to see, is it really oil fouled or fuel fouled. Of course, I'm only pulling one, but I want to start with that before it gets too hot. Okay, so we're back in the vehicle. I'll give you a listen to show you what it sounds like. I don't want to run it too long because I want to do my pressure transducer tests, and then because I just want to get that out of the way. The nice thing about doing those kinds of tests is I can just, once you do them, you save them. You can go through it later, but I just want to get that out of the way, and then afterwards I can go through with the scan tool and kind of see what I see on there. But this is what it sounds like. So I don't know if you can pick that up, but there's a little bit of rattles. Just idling at a high idle, it's kind of okay. I did clear the codes, so they'll be a little bit better for right now. We're starting to get a little choppies. Exhaust doesn't smell too good. It smells like it's running a bit rich. Now we're getting really into the choppies as the idle is coming down a bit. Let's see if I can put it in reverse. There we go. Now we really hear. And then we got the reduced power, and we probably got all those codes again. So I'm going to go back under the hood. I'm going to set all my stuff up and see what I see with that, because yeah, I suspect it's just got some kind of timing issue. I don't know if like I said, I don't know if we have no idea if someone was in there, did the work, maybe didn't set it properly, you know, maybe both the phasers went, who knows. We don't really know anything at this point. Customers never had a chance to drive this. They just bought it, put it on a tow hauler, brought it back, brought it to us, and here it is. So let me set up under the hood. Okay, so to pull the main intake duct off, I just pulled this clamp off, 8mm, and then there's a clamp at the bottom. This hose right there for the PCV breather, you just gingerly pull that out, and then it pops out at the back. We got those style pegs, and that right there, you just kind of gingerly pull it up, and already we see that's pretty black. Ugh, gross. So upon further inspection, yeah, it's kind of gross. If we look, I don't know how well you'll be able to see in there. Oh no. You know, if we look in there, looks about what you'd expect. So yeah, I'm gonna pull, because who knows, it could be possible. And you know what? Huh. Before I go crazy, I saw this on a Diagnostic Dan video. What if these solenoid connectors are interchangeable? I think they're the same solenoids. What if it's just a matter of somebody did some work and that's all that they did is swap these out wrong? So I'm going to go on a wiring diagram, because this one here, closest to the intake manifold, is our intake solenoid. And this one at the back, closest to the exhaust, is the exhaust solenoid. So I'm going to look at the wiring diagrams. We see that this one here has purple. Does purple go to the intake or does it go to the exhaust? This one has green. It's on the exhaust right now. Is that supposed to be on the exhaust? You plug those in backwards, it's going to run awful. Now, it does sound pretty rough, so I don't know if that's the whole deal, but I'm going to look at that. Okay, let's see if we got lucky. Here it says intake camshaft position actuator solenoid. Has a purple wire for the intake, and the exhaust right there has green. I think that's what we had. So I don't think we're this lucky, but let's check it. Exhaust is green, intake is purple. Yeah, so we go back here, that's what we see. Exhaust is green, intake is purple. So not that simple, so we will carry on putting a pressure transducer in there. The intake, I like to go, you want to go somewhere centralized. Might be a little harder to do on this style manifold. I could probably go off the purge here, put my pressure pulse sensor in there, put a relative compression tester, and then we'll see what we see. Okay, so if we look at the spark plug, we can tell it's old. I would have to say those are original. It is pretty black in there. It does seem like it's running pretty rich. Well, we know it's not firing properly, so we kind of expect that. For the pulse sensor, I am going into the outlet, or the inlet, however you want to look at it, for the purge. It's not ideal. You want to go a centralized spot, and this is really close to the center intake ports. You'd like to be more closer to the throttle body, something that's more even. This is going to be a little more skewed towards these cylinders and less so for these, but we can work with that. Okay, so this is what our final setup's like. We got our pressure transducer in the hole. We can unplug the coil, so we're good there. If you can't unplug the coil, you definitely want to give that spark somewhere to go. If you have a coil plugged in, say if you have a distributor. We got our first duct pulse sensor into the evap purge. It's not very centralized, but we can work off of that. We got the high amp clamp around all the negatives. We'll turn the key on, kind of check to see which way the current's going. We might need to flip that. We will definitely turn off the battery charger when we're doing our actual tests. I just wanted to make sure that it was juiced as much as possible so that it doesn't get skewed for our relative compression test. So I will finish setting it up on the picoscope, make sure that the amp clamp is going the right way, and then I'll run it, get my captures both for cranking and then for running. And then also when you're doing running captures, you want to kind of give it a little bit of an elevated rev as well, not just flat idle. You want to kind of do it under different conditions. But let me get the fully set up and I will run it and then show you what I found. Okay, so we got our captures and I'll show you what I do. It doesn't take very long at all. I'll start with the cranking one. Let's pull it up. And come on. Okay, there we go. That's a bit of everything. So what I can start off with is, let's just kind of get a bunch. Let's get the in cylinder down. We'll pull the intake up a bit. And I'm gonna kind of look at most of them individually. Let's pull down some cursors. So this is our relative compression test. And then if we pull up our in cylinder, there we are. That gives us a sync, and we can pull this down. Let's zoom just out one little bit. There we go. That's a little easier to see. And then we're looking for any huge anomalies. Now, keep in mind, we are talking about a timing related issue or a suspected timing related issue, so we don't expect to see it on a relative compression test, because a relative compression test is just that, it compares one to the other. You could have low compression on every single cylinder and they could all look the same if they are the same. We do see that this one right here that coincides with our in-cylinder pressure sensor is a little lower than the others, but you know what, it's not low enough to cause any of the issues that we're dealing with right now. It's low to the point that you might feel a little tiny tip-in hesitation on that cylinder, but not anything significant. So we didn't really expect to see anything super useful on that in our cranking. So then I can pull up, where are you? Let's zoom back out a bit. Get that guy kind of in the mix. We'll pull, so this is our intake pulses. And same thing too, if we look at that, maybe we'll zoom out one little bit more so we can kind of get more of a, 1 second here, we'll get a better frame of that. There we go, maybe that's a little bit better. And we'll get the in cylinder down, we're just going to use it as a sync at this point. We can see that these are all pretty even. And again, that's all we care about. We're just doing a quick check, because this stuff here is just, again, it's just sort of along the lines that, you know what, if we're going through these steps, it doesn't take very much more time to hook this up and to do a cranking one as well. I don't know if I'll need it down the way. I might never need it, but you know what, it's better to have it and not need it than other way around. So then I can get rid of the intake and I can pull up the in cylinder, kind of get a better frame of that. Zoom out again. Yeah, let's pull that up right there. So you can see we went off our scale for the compression check. I only had it set to 200 psi, and you know, I could have had it set for 500, but again, you know what, so one of the things that's nice, if you see the tips, then you can check to see if it's even all the way across, or if you have some strokes that are a little bit lower compression than others. That tells you a bit about the engine. But again, when we look at our intake or our relative compression, they're even throughout over the whole time cranking, so we're not super concerned about that. For this trace right here, for our cranking in cylinder, mainly just using it as a sync and making sure that we are building at least good compression. So that's all we need to look at for there. So let's close the cranking and we can open up our running. And again, we're doing just kind of a quick step here. If you want something maybe a little more precise, you can do the cam crank sensors and you can plot those all together. But in order to do that, you would need a known good. And you know what, sometimes it takes a while to find a known good. Sometimes it also takes a while to hook up to all the various cam sensors as well as the crank sensor. And sometimes some of them are in bad spots, and you know, you got to back probe them, make sure that you're in a good making a good connection, all this sort of stuff. When something like this is just a 4-cylinder, a single bank engine, we're suspecting that the timing's off, but we want something a little more than just our gut to tell the customer that yes, you do in fact need to open the cover and you're going to be paying some dollars. So that's all we're doing here. Just another quick check. So we'll pull over some cursors And there's a 720. We can kind of get this guy out of the way. And we'll pull this over there. We can pull up some partitions, one for each cycle. And then what I like to do also, I will pull, whoa, not that, there we go. So I'll pull down some horizontals and I'll set one of them right to 0. And the other one, I'll just kind of set to, you know, roughly say the bottom of the intake pocket. And then I'm just kind of looking at a couple of little things here. If you see right here, this is the 360 mark. So this is the exhaust stroke. This is as the piston's coming up. Immediately right away, I see things I don't like. Now, there are a few events that are easy to spot. So this right here, our exhaust valve opening, it's pretty easy to spot because the piston's still coming down. So our curve should still be coming down, but it rapidly rises, and it rises because it's exposed to the atmospheric exhaust as the exhaust valve opens. So that one, that one's easy to spot. Exhaust valve closing, not as easy to spot. Intake valve opening, also not very easy to spot. Intake valve closing, sometimes you can spot it relatively easily, because if you look over here, whenever a valve's open, you will see pulses. It won't be a perfectly flat line. Everything's kind of swirling about. So if the valve was not open, so this stroke right here, the piston would be coming down. This is roughly bottom dead center, and then it would start coming up, and you would get a parabolic shape because there's a little bit of float between the wrist pin and the connecting rod. So the piston doesn't just come straight up and then straight down in straight lines. It comes up, it kind of hangs out a little bit around the top as everything kind of rotates, and then it starts coming down. And then same thing too, it hangs out around the bottom as it starts going back up again. So you get a nice, gentle, parabolic shape if no valves are opening. Sorry, I got a frog in the throat. So sometimes you can see it pretty pronounced right around here where you get turbulence from the intake valve being open, and then all of a sudden it goes back to the nice shape of just as the piston's rising. Sometimes you can spot that easily, sometimes you can't as much. But if we look right here, we see a big problem. This 360 mark right here, this is where the piston's at the top dead center for exhaust. Now, this is our 0 mark, so anything above that is atmospheric pressure, anything below is vacuum. If we see right here, when the exhaust valve opens, you get these little pulses. Sometimes it goes positive, sometimes it goes slightly negative. So again, you can't tell exactly when the intake valve is opening. You don't know exactly where the intake valve is opening, pulling it down, or whether it's just a pulse of the exhaust. But if we look, if we drag this cursor over to here, and what we can do is if we look right here, where's our other cursor? Oh, I didn't pull it over yet. Okay, if we put this guy right there, now let's try zooming into that. Hopefully that doesn't make a real mess. It's a little bit ugly, but let's zoom out just one. Yeah, maybe that's harder to understand, harder to see. But if we look right here, so here's our 360 mark. This is our 0 psi mark. So anything below that is vacuum. So right down here, this is where it's going into vacuum from an intake valve being open already before 360. So what does that mean? That means that not all of the exhaust is being able to be pushed out yet. Some of it's getting brought back into the intake. That's EGR. You should never have EGR on a cold engine at idle. It'll run like garbage. So if we look right here, this spot right here where we moved that, so we see that is cursor 2. So we see right here cursor 2 is 15, it's roughly 347 degrees. So it's 13 degrees before top dead center exhaust at idle cold. That's way too early. If we zoom out some more, back to normal, I think it might have been, was it roughly around here? I think I saw one earlier that was even worse than that. Let's see if we can find it. We'll move all this stuff back over. And yeah, this one looks pretty bad. So this guy here that we moved, yeah, so that's at 341 degrees. So that's, 19, 18 degrees before top dead center. That's way too early. And if just going off of what I'm used to, even just this exhaust valve opening at 137 degrees, that looks a bit early. Typically the hump here, the first hump of the exhaust, typically that's a little bit after the 180 mark, kind of roughly right around where the intake valve closing is. Seems a little bit early too, but even if we're not totally concerned about exactly how many degrees, if we look right here, this almost 20 degrees before top dead center of vacuum being introduced to this cylinder, even as the piston's still kind of coming up a bit, definitely tells you that this intake valve is open way too soon and exhaust gas is being pushed into the intake. And that only happens with timing issues, unless, if you have an EGR, but in the cylinder, that can only happen via timing. So we know for sure that with this, yeah, it has a timing issue. This vehicle has been looked at before, so no, it's not just a matter of the solenoids, and it's had so many hands in it in order for us to even attempt to be interested in this. It's kind of have to get the full meal deal, because what do you do? Blindly put just a chain in there, and when you don't know anything else about this vehicle, you've never even experienced it run properly. Yeah, this is the sort of thing where you get married to. But anyways, it's for stuff like this, when I suspect the timing's out and it's a 4-cylinder, or say it's a V8 but it's cam and block, there's only a single cam, and I want to look at timing briefly and I suspect it's out a significant amount, I usually don't bother checking cam and cranks just because it's a little bit of time. I'll just drop this in-cylinder pressure transducer, drop that guy right in the hole, give it a quick whirl, look at it, and you can go from there. If a guy really wanted, at this point, then you could, do a capture of the cam and crank signals and kind of look at that if you wanted to find out exactly what's out, see if both cams are out or just a single cam's out. You could do all that sort of stuff, but you know what? This is enough to know that, yeah, we got to go in that timing chain area. And now is the time where we sit down, we have a conversation with the customer. But at least when we do that, we haven't had to invest any time into opening anything up. This right here literally took about 20 minutes. Okay, so where does this leave us? Well, thanks to this guy here, one of my favorite tools, we know a fair amount. What do we know? We kind of know really what we expected coming into this. However, a job like this, you can't really quote that out. You can't tell a guy you need X number of dollars you know, a couple thousand, 2,000 to 3,000, whatever it comes to with all the parts, without confirming at first. And then, you know, you go into it. So normally how you confirm is you pull the timing cover off. Well, you know, that might take you 2-3 hours. Well, what if the guy doesn't want to do the full job? And we've talked to the customer. We've gotten a little bit more of a story. So the guy is convinced, when he bought it, the person that sold it to him, he's convinced that for whatever reason, that the guy was telling the truth, the seller was telling the truth, that they just somehow needed money, and he's the lucky guy to get it for half of what it's worth, with the exception that it's just not running well, and all it needs is a $1,000 job to replace the chain, just the chain. So it sure seems like people have been in there before. We don't want to do the job twice. So if we're going to do the job coming into this without knowing anything about the vehicle, sorry, it needs everything, especially on one of these kind of guys. It's going to need the chain, it's going to need the tensioner, it's going to need the phasers, it's going to need both of the solenoids. We're just not comfortable doing the job without all of that. Otherwise you end up doing it kind of twice, and they're not going to pay that, and it's not worth it to do it. So yeah, the guy is convinced that it just needs the $1,000 chain job. That's what he was told, and he's definitely not prepared to spend what we would be willing to do it for. So you know, at that point, you come across as the bad guy, saying that you want so much money, and really the best thing to do is walk away from it. Say, hey, sorry, you know, sorry we couldn't make a deal. You know, there's lots of other shops out there. You know what? You can kind of word it as, you know, other people might have more experience. Maybe they'd be willing to do it for less, or maybe they know a trick that we don't know. That's one of the ones that works nicely. And you know what? If they go to a bunch of other shops and they find out all the other shops are saying kind of the same sort of thing, and say they get the work done at one of the other shops, well, at that point they've kind of acknowledged that yes, it is more money, and at least they're getting the work done somewhere else. They're not getting the work done with you, who's the first shop to tell them that no, sorry, it's not $1,000, it's a lot more than that. So you know, you're the one that broke their heart, so to speak. So it's hard to gain their trust back. It's hard to gain their confidence back. Also, on a job like this, that makes it really not very appetizing is we don't know the vehicle, right? So you do this job, the guy's only expecting so much, so then he kind of gets you down to less than what you'd want. Well, what about the rest of the vehicle, right? You know, you don't know if the tranny's any good. You don't know if it needs brakes. You don't know if it needs this, because it hasn't been run. So you can't drive the thing. It's hard enough putting around the parking lot. So that's where we're at. You know, ultimately this guy didn't really make us any money, but it saved us a headache. And yeah, you know what, the guy ended up coming back, and he did say that he went to somebody that a buddy referred him to, not really a traditional shop, I think just someone working out of the garage, and things weren't going well. They had to pull the head. There was a bolt that was broken, this and that, the other thing. And you know, they're asking if we were a machine shop, if we were able to drill this broken bolt out of the head. And we said no. And then you just kind of share a look with each other, you know, the boss and I, just, you know, like he dodged a bullet. One of the other things too, that this is a possibility, that with this vehicle, what might have happened is, you know, I kind of suspect someone was in there. I suspect someone did the job and didn't go well. Maybe they did the chain, and maybe they didn't do the phasers, and maybe the phasers were the problem. I don't know. I don't really have experience with these phasers on these Ecotecs. More of my phaser experience kind of comes with, say, the 5.4s on the Fords. That's what we've done a million of. And on the 5.4s, the way that they work is the phaser's got a big spring, so the spring tension brings it back to a base timing mark, and then the oil pressure will cause it to come off there. So on those phasers there, you just when they're in your hand and they're new and they're working properly, they don't have that little pin that's broken, then all you do is you basically install them and make sure that the mark on the sprocket lines up with the mark on the chain, and then you're good. On some of these other phasers, they are what they refer to as continuously variable phasers. They don't really have that giant spring that locks it to a base timing. They can kind of go back and forth. On these jobs here for these Ecotecs, they do have a bracket that holds the phasers. So what happens is on the back of the phaser, there's a little notch that goes into a notch on the camshaft, and you line up the sprocket with the chain, kind of like on a 5.4 and like all the others. But this holder tool that sits on top of the head, it's got little notches for each sprocket that go into the face of the sprocket. And if you look at it, I'll show you a picture, the notches are at different positions for the intake and the exhaust phasers. So, and then you can kind of lock the phaser in place with this tool, and then you put your bolt in there and you tighten it up. Now, I don't know if you take the bolt off and you're putting a new one on there, if you don't have this tool that locks that phaser in a certain position. We're not just talking about the sprocket, the outer sprocket to the chain, but actually locking the position of the camshaft with the variable sprocket to the outer gear, locking all those positions, because you can have the teeth on the outer sprocket lined up to the chain. Those marks can line up, but it could be like a rack. You pull, say you're changing a steering rack, and you get one that doesn't have a master spline. It just has little teeth all the way around. Well, if you don't line that up perfectly, it'll be out. Your steering wheel will be centered. You go to turn the wheel one way, it'll only go so far this way, but it'll go much further this way, right? So without that holder, it could be possible that maybe you don't have that part lined up. If you just installed the sprocket, it could still be out. Who knows? Maybe somebody did that. I don't know if that's a thing with these or not. Like I said, I haven't done one yet. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing one without that tool. It's possible that that's not needed, and maybe the computer looks at the cam sensors, and just, if you don't line it up perfectly with that, then it'll just adjust it and it can make up for it. I don't know. But that's kind of my suspicion, is that people have been in there and it didn't go well, and they don't want to do it again because they realize it's a losing job. But anyways, sometimes you get some winners, sometimes you get some that it's just best to walk away. We had one come in today that a lady bought a car off a dealership, and she bought a Honda Fit off of a different dealership. Not necessarily knocking that dealership, but it's just it's just kind of one of those cars. And it came to us with misfire, and you got to swap coils, and it's way at the back. It's kind of hard to see anything, and when you pull the coil up, not only does the spark plug comes with the coil, and then you see the whole thing's burnt right out. And anyways, totally rambling at this point. Yeah, the nice thing about these tools is it's always nice on jobs like this that have so many variables of potentially getting ugly. It's always nice being able to know as much as possible as to what to expect, so you can let the customer know what to expect before you get any kind of involvement into the vehicle. Because you know what, at the end of the day, we were able to say, you know what, here's your keys. You can take the vehicle. Don't worry about paying us. You don't owe us anything. You know, we only spent about an hour into it. You know, sorry we couldn't make a deal. Hope it works out for you somewhere else. And you know what? Sometimes it's the best possible outcome. Anyways, hopefully we all had a good time. Hopefully we learned a thing or two along the way. And thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.